To understand the scale of what she pulled off, you have to look here. It's the mid-1990s, winter in Edinburgh, and the cold is the kind that seeps directly into your bones. Joanne is a single mother, recovering from a highly unstable marriage that has just ended. She is grieving the recent death of her own mother to multiple sclerosis. Unemployed and surviving entirely on state welfare benefits, she lives in a state she described as being as poor as it is possible to be in modern Britain without actually being homeless. That poverty dictated the physical rhythm of her days. She wrote in local cafés like this one, often with her infant daughter asleep beside her in a pram, because she couldn't afford to run the heating in her apartment during the day. The story she was working on did not arrive in a sudden flash of inspiration. It was an idea about a boy wizard she had been piecing together slowly, fragment by fragment, jotting notes on loose scraps of paper and in spiral notebooks, while her personal life collapsed around her over several years. Out of that chaos, she finally produced a completed manuscript for a children's novel called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This document represented the only tangible thing she had left to pin her hopes on. She had taken everything she had, her grief, her time, her last ounces of energy, and synthesized it into a few hundred pages. And now she had to hand that singular lifeline over to the clinical, highly systematized machine of the London publishing industry for an emotionless evaluation. She secured a literary agent, and her stack of unbound pages landed on the desks of the most established publishing houses in the country. The initial hope was that someone would recognize the value immediately. Instead, she hit a solid wall of resistance. The rejections came back in a slow, agonizing drip. One publisher said no, then 3, then 5. The manuscript was circulated, evaluated, and dismissed again and again, until 12 distinct publishing houses had officially passed on the work. This chart visualizes exactly what the industry consensus looked like at the time. The editors evaluated the manuscript against strict professional metrics and concluded it failed on 3 counts. The word count was deemed way too high for a children's book. The plot was too complex for its target age group, and, as indicated by market trends, the fantasy genre was considered commercially dead. The professional apathy reached the point where one publisher reportedly returned the manuscript without reading a single word. The system simply looked at the surface-level attributes of the project and stamped it as a guaranteed failure. She took one of those early rejection letters and pinned it to our kitchen wall. It requires a specific kind of endurance to stand in a cold apartment, living on government assistance, and look at a piece of paper telling you that the entire professional world thinks the work you poured your soul into has no value. The 13th submission went here, Bloomsbury. At the time, they were a small London operation known primarily for publishing academic titles, possessing almost no track record in children's fiction. Even inside Bloomsbury, the manuscript stalled. The acquiring editor, Barry Cunningham, saw potential, but he couldn't generate enough internal confidence to push the acquisition through. The industry doubt was so pervasive that the book remained paralyzed in limbo. These 12 publishers did not act out of malice. They were highly trained professionals executing their industry's standard risk assessment protocols, and in doing so, they failed to recognize one of the most valuable literary properties ever created. The cycle only broke because Bloomsbury's chairman, Nigel Newton, decided to step outside the professional echo chamber. He took the manuscript home, bypassed the editors entirely, and handed the first chapter to his 8-year-old daughter, Alice. Alice read it, and she immediately came back and demanded the rest of the story. She didn't know about market trends, word counts, or complexity metrics. She just knew the story gripped her. It was a raw, unfiltered reaction from the exact audience the book was meant for. That single, genuine response from a child carried more weight than a dozen professional evaluations. It broke the industry consensus and gave Bloomsbury the final push they needed to acquire the rights. Yet the institutional doubt still lingered heavily over the project. The publisher paid her a tiny advance of just £2,500 and explicitly advised her to keep a day job. They were so concerned that young boys wouldn't read a fantasy book written by a woman that they forced her to obscure her first name and publish under the initials J.K. When the book launched in 1997, Bloomsbury was so cautious they only printed about 500 to 1,000 copies, sending most of them straight to libraries. But then, the target audience found it. Word of mouth spread, and demand outpaced every projection the publisher had calculated. The series went on to sell hundreds of millions of copies worldwide, translating into over 80 languages and grossing billions at the box office. That single manuscript, the one 12 others rejected, rebuilt the small academic press into one of the most successful publishing houses in the world. Her story teaches us what true conviction looks like. It is the deep, quiet confidence required to survive when an entire industry's consensus is wrong, waiting for the audience to prove it.